we have, this is a special general meeting to consider a new constitution. Oh, hang on.
Do we have the microphone?
The microphone is for recording, not for you to hear me.
It doesn't amplify anything, so...
No, that's another job. We have our secretary, our acting secretary taking notes over there, which is great. I hope you've all signed, all the members and non-members have signed the attendance sheet to indicate that you're here. Any apologies to note?
Apologies from Yock and Seal and Beltran.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and I've got some proxy forms here, 2 proxy forms.
Oh, good, yeah.
So do I give those to you, Leo?
I think you give Chris the forms, I think. And then you can indicate how many votes you're making when you make a vote. Well, not looking very promising.
Do you want me to
Yeah, you can
put it
have
up?
that.
Or?
It's supposed to be HDMI 1.
Yeah, unplug that.
Unplug this one as well.
Okay, now plug it back in.
Oh, again. If I pull that out, that'll probably ruin things. So something. Oh no, it's a USB. I don't know. All right. Well, we have a special resolution, and that's the only business for this meeting, that the North Canberra Community Council adopt the new rules as set out in the new NCCC Constitution circulated to all members on Tuesday 27th of August 2019. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that motion?
Sorry, I didn't understand what the resolution is.
The resolution is that the North Canberra Community Council adopt the new rules as set out in the new NCCC Constitution circulated to all members on Tuesday 27th of August 2019.
Okay, I second that.
Do we have a mover? Sorry? All right. The second part is, in approving this new set of rules, the members present accept that this version may be amended in line with requests from Access Canberra/Registrar's Office upon the lodgement of the Constitution following the passing of the special resolution. Okay, so we have who's the mover?
I'll move.
All right, Jeff moves. Anybody want to second the motion?
I'll second it.
Mark Dudley. All right, we have a mover and a seconder. Anybody want to make have any discussion? Anybody want to speak in favour of the motion? Anybody want to speak against the motion? All right, I'll put the motion. Those in favour, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And Marg, are you 3?
I'm one person, and Sarah. I'm 2 people. Sarah's
That's
2
15.
people.
All right, that's
No,
16.
3 people.
16, 17, 18, 19 people in favour. All right, those against? Well, I guess we have a new constitution. And I think that is a new world record for a meeting. All right. Thank you, Paul. I think congratulations need to go to Paul and the other people who helped. Sarah and Marg and the people from other community councils who helped.
The important thing is you put that form in.
Yeah. Yes, boss.
Yeah, no, straight away.
Okay, we have the form. Right, now I'll close the special general meeting. And we're still trying to get this technology to do something useful. Now, we've got apologies. We've got an apology from Michael Flynn as well. Did you know? You've already noted that. Any conflicts of interest to declare? Okay, minutes of the previous general meeting, 21st of August. Now, Jane has proposed some amendments. which are partly spelling of people's names and also a revised version of the report of the Dixon Residents Group. And also, one of the amendments was that they were still labelled the agenda rather than draft minutes. So if you've got something in your papers that looks like agenda for the general meeting of 21st of August, it's actually the draft minutes. Now, let me see. 12. Yeah, all right. Under 9A, Jane's proposed changes are, I'll have to read them out, I think. Now, the original version says, Jane Goffman advised that Andrew Lee, Alicia Payne and David Smith, the three local federal Labor MPs, are all sympathetic to the concerns raised about Macarthur, Wakefield, Northbourne. However, it is noted that due to the fact that the relevant Senate committee contains some parliamentarians will have limited interest. The revised version is Jane Goffman advised that Andrew Lee, Katie Gallagher, Alicia Payne and David Smith, the four local federal Labor MPs, are all sympathetic to the concerns raised re new height limits on the ABC and Mantra sites interfering with the vista to Black Mountain along Majura Avenue. However, it was noted that due to the fact that the relevant Joint Standing Committee contains only one AC member, interstate parliamentarians will have limited interest. National Trust, ACT and the working group will make further representations to the MCA. Are people happy with that version of Jane's report? Okay, under 12C, at the moment it says, the Dixon Community Association update made reference to the submission that had been submitted regarding the proposed Campbell Section 38 development. The update also discussed the upcoming 50th birthday of the Dixon Library and some of the heritage walks that the association will hold in conjunction. The proposed version is, the Dixon Residents Group update made reference to the submission to the NCA regarding the latest concept proposal and revised DCP for the Campbell Section 38 site, in brackets the old CSIRO headquarters on Limestone Avenue. The update also discussed the upcoming 50th anniversary of the Dixon Library that the ACT Library Service is organising for Saturday 30 November and some of the local heritage walks and or tours of the library that the group hopes to hold in conjunction. So everybody happy with that version? All right. So do we have any other proposed changes to the draft minutes apart from spelling corrections? All right, can we have somebody move that the draft minutes be accepted? Bruce, and do seconder, Jane Goffman. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think, or at least 9. Those against? Nobody against. That's done. Thank you, everybody. Treasurer's report. Can we have a report, please, Bruce?
Okay, a few different items. So the current balance is for our account is $8,585. The key items of expenditure since our last meeting, $950 to the Campbell Residents Association for development of a master plan to do with parks in Campbell, and incorporated in that master plan is actually an element to do with continuing communication of Campbell residents about the development of parks in Campbell. $422 to Friends of Mount Majura for maintenance of their website as it goes on, and $750 for the O'Connor Community Association, which was paying them back for their annual Christmas party event that they have with the community at the end of last year. That one was delayed. So they're the key items of expenditure over the last month. For financial statements, we've got all our financial statements, as I said last month, with the with auditors or independent reviewers who are looking at that. We're aiming to have those reviews done by the AGM next month, at which point we hope to basically sign off for 16-17, 17-18 and 18-19 altogether. We've put out a request for, we've had an underspend from last year because we only got the annual grant in April, and so we effectively only had it from April to the end of June. We've put out a request to community associations for their bids for that money in terms of developing a forward plan. ACT Government's requested a forward plan for that funding as a condition for consideration of our grant for this financial year. I've had bids back from Lynham, Downer, Dixon, Hackett, Campbell and O'Connor. Nothing yet from Watson, Turner or Pialgo. Are there any reps from any of those suburbs? We really need something in the next week or two. But we, having said that, we have got enough to go on in terms of using up the money that we've got at the moment. And then finally, we had a meeting with the ACT government about the grant a few weeks back. They confirmed that they see the primary purpose of the grant as being for communication of residents' views to the government. That covers a whole range of things. It covers obviously the operation of websites, funding campaigns, materials, and obviously the nuts and bolts of meeting and rented rooms and things like that. So it covers all of those things. What they did confirm though is that they are comfortable with the idea that also encompassed in the idea of communication are community events. That is that those kinds of events that we've been funding over the last few years, the party packet, the Life Up Line, things like that, which actually enable the residents' associations to reach out to a wider group of people through these events and establish forms of communication and connection. So they're comfortable with that kind of thing being funded, which in fact is what the council's been doing for some time anyway. But it's good to actually have that clarified and made more explicit. Any questions?
Have you got the current financial year's grant yet, or is it?
No. So what they're saying is they don't want to see the invoice for this current financial year until they've seen a plan for the expenditure of last year's money.
Right, okay. No
We've got
problem.
plenty of money, so it's not an issue about that. It's just an issue about
Yeah.
making sure that they're comfortable that we know what we're doing with the money before they give us a new lump sum.
Sounds like a fair play.
It sounds, from their point of view, I think it sounds very good.
Bruce, I'm sorry, could you tell me the deadline again?
For
associations to
the bids,
Yes, yes.
it was actually the end of last month, but that's okay. We've said that we'll get a plan to the ACT government by the end of September.
Okay.
So if we have something through, I forgot to read, no, but I think we sent you the request, or hopefully we did. But if I can get something in the next
Next week.
sort of week or so, that would be great. And then basically the committee can sign off on a plan back to the ACT government at the end of the month. Thanks, Mayor.
I'm Gordon McAllister, I'm from the Lynham Community Association. Does the NCCC require the residents groups to report back on how the money is spent?
Yeah, that's an item that came up in the last committee meeting. We haven't done so to date, but we're actually thinking that from now on we'll actually include an element which is, can you just come back to us and say, yes, the money was spent in this kind of way and these sorts of things were achieved. It'll just be a way of actually closing the loop on that money. And also what we need to do as part of our acquittal of the grant at the end of each year, at the end of each financial year, we need to give the ACT government a statement about what it was that the money was spent on. In previous years, that's been someone like me just sitting down and kind of dragging it out of their head. But it would actually be much better if we had those report backs, even just brief ones, such that that could actually form the raw material for that report back to government.
No, I think it's a good idea. I mean, we've spent the money, but I think it's reasonable that you know that the money has been spent.
Yeah,
Correctly.
no, I think that's right. Okay.
Thanks, Bruce. Now,
I move that the treasurer's report be accepted.
all right, do we have a seconder for that? Mary Ann, you can be a seconder. Those in favour? Those against? Right, I think we have a majority. Now, we have a couple of items of correspondence. Is it too late for people to...
Sir George Houston Reid is the fourth, and he was a pretty amazing bloke. So he's going to be talking for a relatively short time. Nobody else is going to be talking, except me for a very short time to welcome everybody. There'll be...
He's doing what?
He's going to talk on Sir George Houston Reid, who a number of
Yeah.
some of his name.
Open the September folder
And
and you
his
can get
story. He's also doing
the...
history
did you
of the
copy
radio.
it?
That's not to be under any
Yeah, under
What
Wait,
September.
so-
at the first aid prime ministers?
first aid practice. Yes,
Now, there should be... Oh, what the hell's going on
has
there?
been
Oh, they
commissioned
just
to
look
do the
different.
first aid
Um,
prime ministers, of which
The
George
agenda for the
Houston
general
Reid is
meeting.
fourth.
This
He's
one.
been commissioned to do what for them?
Oh, to the history.
That's what we're going through at the
Sorry.
moment.
Yeah, that's
So you want this
Well,
far?
Open that one.
Yeah.
Right.
So an overall
Yes.
business plan or something.
He's doing the histories
Can
under,
I
I
open?
think, the National Library and I think also the Parliament House to do the first histories. The first eight, it's called, the project's called the first eight. So that goes from first to last. I don't know who the eighth was. So that's what's going to happen tomorrow night. 3-course meal, $40 tribal dinner.
It's funny.
You will
Huh?
need to tell
I don't know if
send
it's installed.
to
Ah, you don't have LibreOffice.
yes, it's on
I
tribal,
loved
so if
everything.
you do want
Ah,
to,
that's a
you need
pity.
to do it that way.
So-
And then I can update it early in the morning with the CRT people. It's the CRT restaurants only open on Thursday night, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity to give the trainee students and the staff and their culinary skills a bit of a run for their money. So I think that's fun.
Okay, so if you want to go, talk to Marianne, preferably after the meeting. The next item is a bit of correspondence. The Independent Competition and Regulatory Commission has released its draft decision on the Consumer Protection Code review. Does anybody have any concerns about that they want to raise with the meeting? It's all... I'm a trained economist and I think I'd have to look through it very carefully to try and even understand what's going on there. Next item, update regarding the cancellation of the Environment and Planning Forum. Oh, we have our agenda display. All right, do you want to scroll down a bit?
Yeah.
You may remember that the Environment and Planning Forum was cancelled with about 2 weeks' notice on the grounds that it was not perceived to be doing what it was intended to do or something like that. ACTCOS wrote fairly soon after that to express its concerns. We sent in a letter expressing our concerns. Combined Community Councils were considering a letter. I'm not sure if they've actually sent one yet. There's been a fair bit of email traffic about it. As yet, there's no indication of what might replace the Environment and Planning Forum. So that's about all I can tell you about it at this stage. Update on NCCC versus ACTPLA and ANOR AT 109-2018. Jeff, would you like to tell us about that?
Well, we had the ACAT made the decision that wasn't compliant in many ways, not in what I originally went to about the traffic, but in sun, the winter salt of sun, in cross ventilation, in building height. They are the main ones. Since then, we've had 2 letters back from the development applicant saying the questioning the building height decision, but they've not questioned the fact that they didn't comply in the 3-hour Windsor Saltus and the cross ventilation, which I think will require somewhat of total building redesign.
Yeah. Now, Dennis?
Where are we talking about, Jeff?
The Soho Mulberry development on Northbourne, between Northbourne and Drawing Street.
Yep.
And I remember when we were at OCAT, they said, oh, we can't get the 3-hour because we can't turn the whole building around a couple of degrees. Well, other people do. They sort of put the building at a SWAT's angles and they have jagged. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they didn't comply.
I think there was also, I know you're concerned about parking, and
Well, they said there was still short of visitor parking.
so there wasn't enough parking in the site either. And one of the interesting comments that ACAT made was about the traffic generated by the development. This is one of several developments in the area, and under the current rules you can only consider the impact of one development at a time,
Yes.
not the combined impacts of a number of developments. And that is an issue that they raised as an issue, but they didn't tell us how to solve it. I think that's a matter for the government to consider.
They don't have a legal stance on it, but ACRA told us quite openly up front, we do not look at the adding of all the things going on at once. It was just when someone hits the final straw, there'll be no more.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to raise that as a major issue on Northbourne. So it'll still stand out that whoever gets approval first, they're lucky because all the others after that won't be able to get approved on the traffic impact.
Well,
Yeah.
they'll just all get approved at the same time. They'll just all get approved at the same time.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
Well, there are ACT guidelines on transport impact assessment, and they say you should consider the traffic at the opening day of the development and also 10 years after the opening day. And you actually got to consider the expected increase in traffic over that period.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps you or not, but
No. And it's like Campbell too, where the CSIRO and at least they base their traffic report on 2011 data.
yeah.
I mean, that's so out of date.
Yeah.
So I think traffic impacts are something you have to look at these days.
I think I forgot to put on the agenda the review of ACT planning, but some of the issues that have come out of that are things that we could consider in our submission on the review of ACT planning.
So you're talking about that we were going to go along the ACT planning and make recommendations or be involved?
Well, the government announced the ACT planning review. It started working on it in about March of this year, and it spent nearly 6 months working on its consultation strategy. And there is a period from about November to next March set aside for community engagement. We don't know what that community engagement is going to look like. And so we're working on the assumption that we will have an opportunity to make a submission, and if they don't offer us one, we can just send one into the minister. and so I have got a report which I'll tell you later about that. So we have actually had a win in ACAT. And I believe that there were quite a few lawyers involved, weren't there, Jeff?
Quite a few.
Quite a few lawyers involved?
Yes, there were on the other side, including ACMA. And there was me, myself, and Jeffrey. But really the two senior members were dominant. They obviously saw all the faults, and they were planning people or builders from way back. And they saw more faults than I did.
Yeah.
And luckily they took it to task.
And I must confess that when Jeff wanted to to appeal this, I thought, well, let's let him do it. I'm not going to put any effort into it. I didn't do a thing, and he's won, all by himself. Congratulations, Jeff. Right, thank you. Input into the ACT Government's 2020 to 21 budget. Do we want to suggest or prepare an input into the budget? It's probably due in about 2 months, I suspect. Is anybody interested in preparing one? I don't think we've done that in the past. Some of the other groups that I'm involved with have done that sort of thing.
That have come up, one in particular was the strategy. I can't remember the name of it now. We have done some.
Oh, we have done some in the past. Yeah. So if anybody's interested, you can nominate to chair a working group. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item. Canberra Airport Preliminary Draft 2020 Master Plan. I have read that some areas over near Queanbeyan are concerned about that because it will mean more aircraft noise over their areas. That was a very big issue in North Canberra about 10 years ago, and that was probably before I joined this council. And I think we were successful in lobbying to have the airport flight paths rerouted so they didn't go over North Canberra, and we are still a member of the Community Aviation Consultation Group, or whatever it's called, and there is no suggestions that I'm aware of that they're thinking to reinstate flight paths over North Canberra. So I suspect that unless that was to happen, we wouldn't be very concerned ourselves. But if anybody's got any concerns.
Is there a link that could go on the NCCC website that could send us to the government page where
There was a link included in the agenda. You can click on that. Yeah.
Is there going to be a happy safety, or is it just...
Pardon?
Is there going to be a happy safety, or is it just...
Sorry, can you speak up?
Do you know how the government's going to communicate the...
So I think they're accepting written comments until 6th of November, and then they'll also have some public sessions apparently. So 3 different public sessions. So when I send the minutes, it'll should have that link as well.
So if you have any concerns, you can bring them to the October meeting. And we do sit on the Community Aviation Consultative Group, which deals with these things on a fairly regular basis. We're represented by the Pialligo Residents Association, which is part of our area. The ACT Sustainable Energy Policy 2020 to 25 discussion paper. Any issues people have with that? I haven't even looked at it. And the update on drone delivery service regulations. Now that is something that I haven't been concerned about until I read that North Canberra is the next stage of expansion of the drone delivery service. So is anybody concerned about it now?
Yes.
Yeah. Do we want to form a working group? All right. Do we want to form a working group? Yes or no?
I will form, once I find out what's happening, I would put my hand up.
So Jeff will convene the working group on drones?
Yeah. The Hackett Community Association put in a submission to the drone review, so we may well want to put someone on that working group as well.
All right. Yep, great. Yeah?
What do you know, when you said more cameras next, what do you actually know already?
I just read something in the Canberra Times or something that it was happening. I have read that there's been a vacuum in government until very recently, when the Civil Aviation Safety Authority or somebody like that finally decided that drones were aircraft, and therefore they came under their jurisdiction, and now they're going to have to do something about it.
Maybe we should let the flight path come over North Canberra, keep the drones.
Yeah. You're not allowed to shoot them down unless you're a magpie. They have a new quiet drone which is still exceeds the allowable noise level if it's too close to you. Hmm?
I said, that's crazy.
Yeah.
We have a magpie training working group.
Good idea. Now, the Section 72 working group has been busy, very busy and inundated with all sorts of information, mainly from the government. Would somebody from that working group like to tell us what's been happening? And
Let's see, Section 72, I've got to get my head around where that's happening. You would have all seen probably stuff in the paper about the Common Ground project. So that was announced on Thursday, and on that same day, 4 of us went in to hear the presentation. There was a briefing that Housing ACT had organised. That was held in Dixon. We walked in and there were about easily 20, maybe 25 people around the table, most of whom we've never seen before. The proposal looks like they've done a lot of good work on it, to make it as attractive as you could make the building on the old Dowd website we're talking about. So it has 2-story, 4-story and 6-story elements. Basement car park. They've got community gardens as part of it. They're proposing a new definition of social enterprise to deal with the ground floor level, where there would also be a cafe and theoretically craft workshops or other sorts of activities. And they're targeting a cohort of older women with children and families. So the Common Ground model, if you're not familiar with it, is it's meant to be a 50-50 split. So you've got 50% of it affordable rental housing, that would be managed by Common Ground, and the other 50% would be for people who have been experiencing homelessness. And so the idea is that those people have special needs, and so you've got wraparound services, which Northside Community Service presumably will be providing. And the construction, I think they're looking at 2021, maybe late 2020, not quite clear. Right now we're in the pre-DA phase, so we've been given 8 weeks to look closely at 2 particular things. If you live in the area, you've probably got one of these in your letterbox. And what it's prompting people to do is to go onto a website, look at the plans. So these are concept plans. They're architectural plans, and they'll also be doing other engagement, probably up at Dixon Library or near the shops, to encourage people to actually have a look at these and give feedback. The important thing to remember is that the associated with this is a draft variation to the territory plan to rezone that block of land, because at the moment the zoning is a commercial zoning, CZ6, which prohibits residential use. So that residential prohibition, of course, is a major stumbling block. It also has a 2-story limit across the whole of Section 72. And this, of course, will have a 6-story element and a 4-story element. So because it's got 6 stories, it's been to the National Capital Design Review Panel, who I believe have only looked at it once, but their comments were positive, we're told. We don't actually have a copy of their report, so we don't really know. I'll be looking at the draft variation very closely, because it will include a definition of supportive housing that apparently doesn't already exist in the territory plan, and a definition for social enterprise. So they'll be basically trying some new things. The important thing to keep in mind is what they're planning to do. What they're proposing in the draft variation is to rezone this block from the commercial zone that's there now to a community facility zone. From my point of view, that's really positive. This entire section 72 operates as a community precinct, and yet it has a commercial zone over it. And so converting parts of it to a community facility zone are going to be helpful. Anyway, so we've also had a letter from Rachel Stephen-Smith just in the last few days. I think everybody on the committee received that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, where we're at is we're in the consultation phase. Consultation will end on the 1st of November. That's a good period because we're not into the Christmas shutdown. So people might actually have time to look at some of this, which would be great. Because I'd like there to be more than just me. And I don't want to influence people in terms of how, if people are positive or negative or whatever it is, I think it's important that they get that input.
Yeah, all right. Now, I'd like to interrupt the proceedings at this point because we have Candice Birch in our meeting. She's the Shadow Minister for Transport and
Public Sector Management.
Public Sector Management, right. That's two big jobs. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Candice, so I'm one of your local Liberal MLAs. I do apologise, I haven't been along to one of these meetings for a while. I realised only recently that your agenda notices have been going into my spam folder, so we haven't fixed that problem. But I do constantly have contact with a lot of the residents' associations about local issues and concerns. From our perspective, a couple of key things that we have been pursuing recently have been a lot of local planning issues with local residents' associations, but also the changes to the bus network, which I know have had a huge impact on a lot of people in the north, the removal of a lot of stops and a lot of local services, as well as the lack of reliability and the cancellations that we've seen in the weekend bus network. So it has been good that we have recently had a little bit of action from the government on the weekend bus network. They released an action plan yesterday and they are looking to fix some of those issues. I'm happy to take any questions if there's anything specific you'd like to chat about, or hang around afterwards if any of you want to talk individually about any concerns.
Thanks, Candice. And if I can just say that I've done a bit of analysis of the boardings numbers, and based on that, it looks like making public transport free increased patronage by 11% over the ACT, and the introduction of stage 1 of light rail increased boardings by 5%. Now, a 5% increase in boardings, given that with the light rail some people have to transfer from buses, they board the bus and then they board the light rail, that means probably less than 5% increase in actual public transport journeys. And based on that, it appears that the government has now achieved its 2011 target of 9% of journeys to work by public transport, and it is yet to achieve its 2012 election commitment of 10.5% by 2016, and we still don't know how it's going to achieve its 2012 election commitment of 16% by 2026.
Yep. And we did see, as you say, the month of free travel did encourage a lot of people to give the network a go.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of complaints about that, which are issues that we are still trying to get the government to address. Some of the key problems, as you've identified, the number of boardings increased because people did have to take more trips. Instead of catching a direct bus, it was now a bus, a tram and another bus, as a result of the new network. And so as a result of that, boardings went up while journeys didn't necessarily see the same increase.
Hmm.
The government has now adjusted their language to talk more about journeys instead of boardings.
Yeah. And the good thing is that when people say wonderful things will happen if we make public transport free, we've now done the experiment, and you know what it actually does do.
Yeah. I think the key as well is it needs to be reliable, and that's what we've seen with the weekend network. If you are getting the bus and your bus doesn't show up and the next bus also doesn't show up, you're much less likely to try to get the bus again. So reliability is also really good.
I think so. Just also, as someone who catches the bus to and from work, commute times is also a factor, because I'm not going to buy a car because my commute time is much longer. So I'm kind of a captured market for public transport. So the satisfaction while using the service is a consideration as well as
Absolutely, and that's something that we've seen huge issues with, particularly in the outer regions. So Tuggeranong, Woden and Belconnen have all seen a decrease in patronage, while that patronage increase has largely come from the Goom Island and the inner north. And that is largely because their travel times have increased. There were people who had direct services that, it took them 40 minutes to get to work, and now it takes them an hour and 20 minutes. So you're right, people are very much just going to jump back in the car again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Right, now back to the agenda. Wakefield and Macarthur Northbourne Working Group. Yep, sorry?
Did Jane finish on section 7?
Oh, did you finish?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, I have one question.
Right.
And that was, you just mentioned common ground.
Yeah.
Has anything happened with the rest of section 72? Have we been told anything's going on?
I need a core forecourt upgrade, and that's important. So that's now underway. It was announced really quite recently. I think just last week I got a call, and the project's being managed, I think, by EPSDD, not City Renewal. We had a meeting today in the Directorate's offices about what sort of design themes, and I've written to them after that, and other members who went along will probably also put in some more suggestions. But they're moving very fast with that because, as I understand it, the procurement phase took many months, and of course the pool reopens on the 21st of October, so they're under the gun. And I gather that 26th of September they're going to start the construction work, and the 7th of November they're having to transplant some trees that were on the old CFMEU site, and pick them up and pop them into that garden bed. You might be familiar, outside the pool there's a really derelict garden bed. It has 6 Chinese elms in it that are apparently really stunted because they've never been looked after or watered or anything, so their root system is just not really functional. So they're going to be digging all of that up, putting in new soil, bringing in these 4 Manchurian pears that apparently they've nurtured over winter, so that their root balls have kind of started to separate, and plonk them in, and then they'll do a bunch of landscaping around that. So it should look pretty good by mid-November, I would think. And they're going to go crazy with painting the paving and making it look funky, basically. Shade umbrellas, seating, that sort of thing. IKEA.
Okay. Next item is Macarthur Wakefield Northbourne Working Group update, which I think is Jane again. Is that right?
It is. Right. So we had a very interesting conversation with the NCA recently, 2 weeks ago in fact, and I followed that up. What happened was the National Trust and the NCCC's working group we went first to Parliament House and we met with the local members, and then we followed that up, went into the NCA.
But you have to go.
And this is about the problem of the increased building heights at the corner of Northbourne, MacArthur, Wakefield. So the controls that used to exist, sorry, that's okay, I'm going to bore people. Yeah, the controls that used to exist effectively put a 32-metre height cap onto each of those 4 corner blocks. The new controls will have a series of heights, one of which goes to basically the maximum height you can have in the central Canberra area that the NCA will allow. And our concern with that is that it obstructs the vista to Black Mountain. Anyway, so the meeting with the NCA was a bit tense, but reasonably productive. Yeah. So, yeah, that wasn't an easy meeting. Interestingly, though, I found out just 2 days ago that on Friday they went ahead and registered the most recent amendment to the National Capital Plan, which basically was a patch to the earlier amendment, which introduced these heights. So that's now gone ahead. I got a conciliatory email yesterday from Andrew Smith, the Chief Planner, saying that I should have a talk to his 2IC next week when she comes back from leave. So we're really not sure where that's at. The difficulty we have is that if we try to prosecute this through the Senate, and the whole problem with dealing with the Senate, of course, is making sure that Katie Gallagher can get the numbers. Because otherwise, you put a whole bunch of effort in, but it really doesn't go anywhere. Our concern is to actually get this fixed. So what we're trying to do is work through the NCA and come up with some language that they can insert into the National Capital Plan that talks about respecting vistas. Vistas, views and landmarks. I've been looking at some of the stuff that was done for the Melbourne Shrine of Remembrance, and they pick up this issue that vistas, views and landmarks are important. For some reason the National Capital Plan doesn't.
But there must be also some really good guiding text in ICOMOS.
Yeah. Look, there must be material all over the place. The problem is, I just don't have time to dig it up.
Sorry.
I mean, that's the problem I'm facing. And the reality is that the NCA, this is their job. They're being paid to do this. So, we'd like to basically put it back to them to do the job.
And one of the comments made during the meeting was that the NCA was very proud of the work they had done to actually bring us up to, what was it, 1967 or something. I can't remember, probably a little bit out, but they've actually got planning laws now that New South Wales has had for 25 years.
Yeah.
And I thought, excuse my English, but holy bloody hell. They've just finally caught up to 25 years ago.
This is the bad city.
Yes, this is the National Capital Authority who plans our city.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah,
Alright.
so I was a bit with that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's where things were.
Yeah. Okay.
I had another conversation with the 2IC.
Now, Combined Community Councils update. I did have the minutes of the previous Combined Community Councils meeting, which had been approved, and my own report on the last meeting. Did that get circulated, or should we circulate it? I don't have copies of those with me at the moment. Did that get circulated widely, or with? Came from me to a small group of people. Ah.
I came up with the agenda.
Oh, it did come out with the agenda. Oh, that's good. So, are there any issues from that anybody wants to raise? If not, yeah.
You're down to look at, you're on a group looking at public open space land management. Can you talk a bit about what that's
Um,
involves, please?
Yeah, the community councils have been concerned about open space and management of it for quite a while. I did a little bit of investigating, and I found that there's about 9 different categories of public open space, including stuff that's designated and zoned as open space so that it should stay as open space, and there are other bits of land which have signs on them, in some cases saying this space is reserved for future development. So if it's got a sign on like that, you know that it might look like a park today, but it could be something else in the future, and you shouldn't be surprised. And somebody said that it was pretty easy to identify the public open spaces, so I looked in the territory plan, did a search for public open space, and came up with about 2,000 parcels of land that have that particular zoning. And so, looking at the thing as a whole doesn't seem to me to be something that somebody like me can easily do. And then you've got all the other categories of open space too. So we haven't got very far. We know we're concerned about it. A few years ago we raised the issue about what is essentially a car park at the moment down near the corner of Watson Street and Barry Drive, which they wanted to turn into a bus layover. And I took a photo of the public open space sign looking towards the car park, saying, well, if this is supposed to be open space, let's keep it as open space and not turn it from a car park into a bus layover. And they haven't moved on that bus layover yet, but the bus layover that it's supposed to be replacing is still there. That's the one on Marcus Clark Street. So I don't know what they're doing about that particular one, but that's only one of thousands of parcels of public open space, and there is a lot of concern that we might lose too many of them before we realise how much we've lost. It's one of the concerns in the new greenhouse, the climate change strategy. They want to have something like 30% vegetation cover in the vegetation or permeable cover, like gravel, in the territory within about 10 or 20 years. Within about 10 years, I think. At the moment, the figure's something like 21%. So they've got a target to increase the amount of basically tree cover, I think, or vegetation cover. So that's a step in the right direction, at least. Anything else?
Could I just ask you, has anybody actually mapped? Can you actually see it from a satellite image or something like that, Landsat, or to see what is happening, what the status quo is at the moment, as well as so you can look at it in a year's time and
Probably. I was surprised when I saw photos of Canberra about 50 years ago compared with now, and it's actually much greener now than it was then, because I suppose originally it was pasture land with not many trees, and then the suburbs came and people planted trees in their yards, and in general there are more trees around than there were then. I don't know how it compares with before European settlement though.
my concern is what the current situation is, so there's some way of measuring it with future effects. And to me that sounds like satellite imagery.
Yeah, going back nearly 30 years, I was working in the Bureau of Resource Sciences, and they were about to map Queensland to find out how much land clearing was going on, and using satellite imagery. So it can be done, yep.
Marion, the CSIRO make up a year around 2004 or something like that. Did a huge job of mapping Canberra's tree cover.
2004?
No, somewhere around there.
Right.
I was working with them on something else, and that was part of the maintenance.
Well,
they did a huge job, but the CSIRO unit was doing it just now disappeared.
So that's baseline data for measuring.
It was all there. It was wonderful there. Their biggest argument they came up with is that the government's intended to look at the green spaces that they control. And it's time to start looking at the total being private land as well. And they'll estimating how much private land really is in government control, and all this. It's actually fabulous stuff. But as I say, that whole unit disappeared.
Yeah.
I know one or two of the people involved might try and find it and get back to me. So, is that a little going somewhere?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting, if it's possible, and I might be comparing apples with oranges, it'd be interesting to compare that with the urban mapping
Yeah.
that was recently done, because again, that was aerial photography.
Yeah.
Which was done last year, I think.
And I
Again,
think
sorry.
I think with Google Earth you can look at satellite pictures of a location now and then go back in history to look at older ones. I don't know.
And with the ACT ACT MapEye,
Yeah.
they have
Mm.
all the satellite images going back a number of
Do
years,
they? Ah, right.
historical
Yeah.
images as well, so you can flick between different years.
Yeah. So.
What
Yeah.
I suppose I'm getting at is I would like to see a systematic accounting of
Yeah.
what is actually happening over time. And
Yeah.
if there's a baseline,
Yeah.
yes, so you can track what's happening. So if there's a 2004 CSIRO, and there's another one, the urban mapping of Canberra, just recently with CSIRO, it was last year. And
Yeah.
then we keep looking at that and seeing
Yeah.
what is happening, because there's certain projections about the numbers of trees that are meant to be planted, the sorts of trees that we
Yeah.
need to plant because of the canopies, etc. But this, I suppose I'm appealing for some more science,
Mm.
some metrics.
Yeah.
to
It's also
understand.
the implementation. I mean, there's a lot of very dead-looking trees
Absolutely.
along the Lake Trail.
You did right.
You plant them all in the middle
Yeah.
of drought, or you're not considering
Yeah, I
water
think-
requirements.
I think you
So
can
the-
fairly readily get an idea of the total vegetation cover and the density of it. Getting an overall picture of which parts are zoned in ways that means they'll stay stay open space or stay reserves is a lot more difficult, I think.
But it's an important tool to be able to measure what's happening. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that's missing at the moment.
Yeah. All right. Any more on that one? Yeah.
I'm just going to add from working a little bit of like mapping GIS sort of stuff to generate maps like that. It's actually quite pricey. Just getting the computer programs to identify vegetation things from above doesn't always work quite as easy as you want because it deals with a lot of different colour identification, and so usually you have to back up with ground surveys. So it does like to generate map by map to actually be accurate enough to go, I've got fairly fine percent change in colour, it would be a lot of work. But it's not, but I was saying it's not doable, it's just...
It sounds like something that should be done in SARA, it's probably the best place to get doing it. And it's a government, it should be a government.
Okay. Committee decisions. Now, at the end of August, we clarified a decision that was made on the 2nd of May. And the decision is that on the 2nd of May we decided that the NCCC will not pursue policing and or managing potentially illegal and or inappropriate behaviour of ACT public servants beyond referring to the appropriate authority, and no NCCC committee / executive member, whether in an NCCC or personal capacity, shall pursue issues related to Technical Amendment TA 2012-06. Anyone wishing to do so must first resign from the committee. To not resign will trigger action under the Constitution to remove that member from the committee. And what else did we do? Oh, we had a financial report. We accepted Jackie Owen, Sabrina Clark, Adriana Boyson, Simon Clark, Diane Rogers and Ben Dennehy as new members. Welcome if any of you are here. And we talked about guest presenters for our general meetings, and we agreed to pay for PA equipment for the Downer Community Association. We agreed in principle to provide money for the Dixon Community Association, which I think has got a different name, but I think you know what we mean. And the Hackett Community Association for an annual party and a heritage map. Campbell Community Association for reprinting of a book, The Campbell Community. And we will be asking the funding recipients to provide a report outlining broadly how those funds were spent. And the committee agreed to draft a short letter about the Environment and Planning Forum. That was in August, and tonight we had a committee meeting where we accepted a membership application from Margaret Henderson, and we will probably get a presentation on the Common Ground site, which is Dixon Section 72, at our October general meeting. They asked to present some information here tonight, but they only asked yesterday, I think, or maybe the day before, and we thought that wasn't enough time for people to think about it, particularly. Yep.
Hi, do you remember I asked you about a guest speaker on Moving Canberra Integrated Transport Strategy? Because we missed out on the giving our feedback before April, and now with all the problems with transport, I think maybe it's time for us to get some information. I think I brought that up at a committee meeting in May.
All right. We'll put that on our list of speakers to consider for future meetings. It looks like at the moment we'll have Dixon Section 72 in October and Shane Rattenbury on the climate change thing in November. We could possibly have the transport strategy at the same time because there are some links between the two.
Excuse me.
Yep. Sue?
For October's meeting on the Common Ground,
Yeah.
given the large number of panels and illustrations that they have, which they had at the presentation last week, would it be possible to have those put up a bit earlier and let people come before the meeting and have a good look and talk to the experts who would be here, like from 7 o'clock on, and that could be notified in the papers that go out, because there's a lot to look at, and rather than just have a presentation and people having to think on their feet, they'd be able to have a bit more food for thought before the meeting.
Yeah.
Because I think there should be lots of time for question and answers.
Yeah, we'll also be having, almost certainly be having our annual general meeting in October too, so that'll be a fairly busy night. That's a good idea actually, assuming we can fit everything in one night. That's committee decisions. I'll just give a quick report from the Planning Review Working Group. We haven't actually sat down together and met yet, but we've exchanged some ideas. We've identified 4 issues so far. We've gone into more depth in some of them, but first one I've listed as the planning system is too complex. Second one is loose wording in merit track criteria permits substandard developments. It's intended to allow for superior developments, but it's loose enough to allow substandard ones as well. Private certifiers have a conflict of interest, and there's too much reliance on volunteer assessors like community councils, like people like Jeff, who have to spend a lot of their, people like Jane, who have to spend a lot of their time doing background work on development applications because the government doesn't properly assess them. And so they're doing the work of the government. If anybody's got other issues that they think we should be raising in our submission, or if you'd like to join our working group, please let us know. Now, the only other thing I've got on the agenda is Residents Associations updates. Yeah?
Leon, can I just in this item, can we just have a quick discussion about what the new constitution, now that it's been approved, actually means for residents associations, and what it is they need to do in terms of nominating, committee members prior to the meeting, the AGM.
All right, maybe Paul could.
You all read it, surely.
Hey?
You all read it.
I didn't actually
Just
read
just
it
be
through.
useful to just have a bit of clarity.
I think I spoke a bit about this last meeting. I think the big change, once it happens, Leon, I want to talk to you about when the AGM is, because I just divert for a second, because the AGM needs to be timed. You get that document in there, they approve it. So
Yeah.
you, only gives you 21 days to give notice to the AGM. We want to do it under these rules.
Yeah.
Under the current legislation changes, you actually don't have to have the AGM in October, you can have it in November.
All right.
That's not the constitution, that's the legislation that actually says 5 months, not
Yeah.
4 months.
All right.
There
Yeah.
is a change, let's get you to consider that as you get that document in and find out how quickly they'll respond. I
Yeah.
have no idea how quickly they respond to things.
Mm.
So what you're saying is that the AGM may have to be pushed out a little bit
In November,
to be consistent.
well, we want to run the AGM under the new constitution.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the obvious, you end up having an AGM and then having another special meeting, another AGM or something. I mean, I just don't know how long they take to turn it around, and also how long you quickly get, you hopefully agree tonight, the 2 people will sign it and get it in there as fast as possible and pay the $44. Because if they come back within a week or something, well, you can go for October.
Yeah.
Sarah, who left, has been in contact with them, very, very assiduously, going through detail, so it'll just be a bureaucratic, put it in the tray while they work on it. We don't know. We haven't been there before. Back to your question. The biggest change I see happening within this is what I witnessed, because we based this on the Inner South one, so I've attended some of their meetings. And the difference is, see, when I came in tonight, we were having a committee meeting. The difference would be, sitting at that table, the committee is made up of all the residents groups. And that's the big difference. And the other big difference between this, I'll just put this on the table and you consider it, or the new committee can consider this, is they actually have general meetings or public meetings every other month. And in the other month, they have a committee meeting, which is also a public meeting, hence like a casual. And just sit there, just observe. So that takes the workload off a little bit in one way, but just shifts the workload around a bit. Because people have been saying, well, if we're in a local residents group and we're doing a good job, you're asking us to double our workload. And I totally sympathise with that, of course. But I think that if you rejig the way that, or whoever it is, rejigs the way this body works, yes, there will be some more workload, but the benefit will be that if you've got an issue locally, when the committee meets, that's you. You can put it on the table and get everybody else agreeing that this is now the agenda for the NCCC going forward, rather than saying at a meeting, well, we've got an agenda, we've got an item, you are setting the agenda. That's to me the big difference. That's the way the whole thing, that's why I pushed this forward, is this way that all different community groups will be the committee. So that answer I think that answers your question.
It was actually, I think that's actually really useful, but specifically about the nuts and bolts of, so residents associations are going to need to nominate 2 people each in time for the AGM. They can't, technically they can't actually do that until the new constitution is approved.
Well, once the AGM is called, hopefully under the new rules, it's all go. You make your nominations. And the difference will be on the night of the AGM, all that happens with that part of the committee is that the NCCC membership, what word you used, basically just acknowledges they're in. There's no debate about it. If you put 2 people forward, they're on the committee. There's 3 different layers of the election on the night. There's also the actual election for the office bearers. But for that bit, it's just, who are they? They're in. Now, if there are people missing, on the night they can nominate people and say, okay, you be the hacker person. And you can be nominated on the night, and if those present agree, you become the hacker person on the committee.
And the reason
quite different hacker.
And in the draft constitution, there isn't a timeline about that, so you don't have to actually have those names from the residents' associations to the NCCC
Well, there is
a specific time before the AGM. It can be any time up to the AGM. It looks like, it doesn't look like there's a...
There is a call for nominations, but if the nominations are there, it happens on the night.
I think that's useful for me. I don't know if it's useful for others. Just be.
So
We need to go back to our residents' associations and just be clear about what it is that they'll have to do.
yes, the next bit is just that form and how they react to that form. It could be happening within a month, it could be happening within 2 months.
Just another question, something that's come up in our group. Yeah, I mean the workload on the association is going to sort of increase. And one issue came up: do these two people who go on to the NCCC, does it have to be the same people all the time? Because it might be that different meetings we might have to delegate.
You can delegate. It's in the constitution. You can delegate.
And it doesn't have to be a committee member from the residents, so it could be just an ordinary member from that
Nominated by the... Oh yeah, it doesn't have to be a committee member.
No.
They only have to be a member of that association.
So in this case, put forward by them.
Excuse me, can the committee co-opt people along the way if they wish?
And not co-op extras than what they have, but if there are vacancies, they fill the vacancies.
So, yeah.
They don't co-op extras rather than the numbers. If the numbers are all there, that's it. If there are vacancies, the committee can go hunting for people.
So if there aren't vacancies and they need people to help them on things, how will they do that?
Well, I think you do what other committees do. You get somebody in to be just a visitor, but officially you can't become the committee.
Right, that's okay. Yeah.
But there's nothing to stop people. It's a public meeting, don't forget.
So how many people will be rather big committee then?
Yeah, if they're all there, it's a big committee. It hasn't been so on the south.
25.
It hasn't been so on the south side. You know, there's 2 from there, 1 from there, and they don't show up often, and all that sort of stuff. So yes, but
As long as there's enough chairs for everyone.
I'm afraid democracy can be onerous sometimes. But I think to answer both questions, I think while there will be some increase in work, the problem is we're on the north side where everything seems to be happening at the moment. To me, the payoff is that you're there, you are now the committee. So if you've got an issue with Lyna, you're not sort of coming to this meeting from now on, every meeting hoping to get some attention and then hoping for the follow through. That was one of the biggest complaints I found people were dealing with, is the way the NC, this is not meant to be anything of criticism, it's fact. People felt that they came to the meetings, they raised the issue, and the NCCC moved on to other things, and their issues disappeared, not willfully, just that's the way things happen. But this way, you are the committee. So if you don't feel as though your issues hasn't come from last meeting, we'll put it back on the table and start again. You know? You're there. So to me, that's the payoff. I think there's more work, a little bit more workload, but your work will have more value, I hope. That's all I can say. Is that the structure is there to allow that to happen. And if you're asking any questions, no, I'm not standing. I think I've done my work, I'm getting out of the way now.
Well done.
That was a terrific job to get that
Yeah.
constitution together. Two of us did that.
Thank you.
Any more residents group reports?
Yes. Sorry.
Read my report.
As you know, we're 75 years old this year. We were the Reed Progress Association before we segued into the Reed Residents Association. That's when it was first. We've even got the old, it's more than foolscap book with the leather binding at the side of it to prove it. All beautifully handwritten in sort of copperplate writing. I was just going to say that we have finally been successful in having the unsightly shipping container that afflicted Reed Park moved further around the oval to a less obvious spot, which was amazing, almost remarkable. Anyway, the other thing that was very much exercising us was the issues over a proposed planned rebuild of Mr. Fluffy House in 2301 Gardens, which the Heritage Council deems to reflect and complement the heritage values of the Reed housing precinct, in which just about everybody else in Reed disagrees with. The people who own that block, having paid $1.3 million for it, have now put it on the market for $1.599, and we hope it stays as an empty block for quite some time till somebody comes along with better plans. We will wait and see. We're still getting letters from Mr. Gentleman defending the decision of the Heritage Council that reflects and complements his the right form of words. We find it a bit rather pantechnic and through. But anyway, the other thing I will want to raise your attention to is at the end of this month, 30th of September, it's a Monday. I think this is not just specifically applied to Reed, but Roger Pegram is going to be talking as a trust talk on Monday night, the 30th, on the book that he released recently called, titled A Very Great City, One Day. And I think it gives you pause for thought. Anyway, he's a good raconteur, so if you are interested, hop on to Trust Talks, an ACT National Trust event. I won't go on to the usual densification problems, tree succession planning. That's in the future.
Okay. Any other? Dixon?
Yeah, sorry, still a few things to fill people in on. I'll do the easy thing first. I'm going to be giving a talk at the Heritage of the Air Conference at the ANU in mid-November, which will present findings of the research I've been doing into Dixon's aerodrome, the lost airfield, and the very first air crash that happened in the ACT. So that's on Saturday the 16th. Anyway, if anybody is interested, it is on Saturday. The other things, so talked about the pool forecourt, and we talked about common ground in section 72. Haven't mentioned the Woolly Street experiment that's happening. So you may have seen some barricades have gone up. There are about 16 car spaces, I think, that have been taken out of action, and they're putting they're trialling, I think it's going to be seating in that area. It's a bit hard to say yet. And they'll be doing other things. Of course, they've put this sort of fake Chinese gateway onto Woolly Street, which it's a trial. It's an experiment. So, yeah. Anyway, go along, give them feedback, and yeah, just see what you think, because it's important. A lot of the experiments, some of them may work and some of them may not, but it's good that they're trying things. The important things that they're doing are probably the events, and that's in November. So there's going to be night markets, some sort of other things in that period. So that should actually be pretty fun, and I think it'll be great for people to go along and actually participate. Sorry, you were going to say?
It's actually a question about this, but through you, Leon. Have you been involved at all in the Woolly Street things?
Not personally, no.
Has the entrance been approached at all? I asked this because, like, in another role I have, I actually visit other meetings, and when these pop-up things happen in other places, they're talked about within the meetings. But I've noticed in this meeting, it's a sideline event. I was wondering what happened there.
Dennis, have you got something to say?
I was representative previously when I was chair here with the beginnings of those groups, but I have not done anything with
Not the
them.
town group itself, I mean, as this,
Well,
this should be a direct, in theory, this should be a direct, what's it called? The City Renewal Authority to enter and see conversation. And I'm just making that comment because I see it in other forums, and it occurred to me, I just haven't seen it mentioned, except that, as you mentioned now, Jane, or someone mentioned it last time, that it was happening as such. I've got my views on it, but as Jane knows about when a pop-up's a pop-up, when a pop-up is a bureaucratic 3-week event.
There's also been virtually no advertising or community awareness raising of it across the Dixon Group Centre. I mean, I gather there's big panels over near Woolly Street, but there's
Yeah.
nothing else
Yeah.
anywhere else.
Now, I did go to the official launch of the strategy for beautifying Civic, and my impression, which may be wrong, is that this is a separate exercise.
It's a separate exercise.
Yeah, and it does give the impression of being something that has been done in a bit of a rush, which is not necessarily a
I
bad
don't think
thing.
it's been done in a rush because I was having a coffee with someone from Garland talking about Garland. Things I looked up and went, what's that on the wall? And there are all these posters on the wall that I see for the first time saying starts tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's been a rush as such, but okay, I'll stop. It's just more as a comment or a question. Is the NCCC non-involvement? It's been a bit stunning, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure that once it's actually open, people will say, this is great. So that's the Woolly Street thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is, well, I was already brought people about colds, and I think I need to bring it up. So, you know, the Minister used to call in Paris and approved the Coles development. So that's now going to go ahead. The notice of decision talks about a construction period parking plan that the proponent has to submit to the satisfaction of the planning authority. I got in contact with the planners to check where things are up to. They said they've given an extension, so it's not clear when something's actually going to surface. I'm concerned that we really don't have any input. There is no process where once something's approved, they don't need to consult with anybody about what the construction period parking plan might consist of. And we're concerned about that because obviously you can't just invent parking spaces, and we don't know where they could possibly come up with them. We know that the likelihood is that the construction workers' vehicles will be plonked onto the Block 6 in Section 72, which is between the Anchor Gallery and the Childcare Centre. So that's the block that right now has a barrier around it. So that was all demolished. All the asbestos was taken away. Presumably this means that construction workers' vehicles will be turning up from 6:30 in the morning, and that will turn into a car park, and probably for 2 to 3 years. The question is, what does that do to everything else? And where do you put all the shoppers who no longer have anywhere to go? Anyway, so I'm proposing that there be a letter from the NCCC to both ministers, Nick Gentleman and Rachel Stephen-Smith, as Minister for Urban Renewal, seeking an opportunity for the community to have some input into the construction period parking plan, at least to see what's being put forward.
I agree. That's fine.
Okay, we have a committee meeting coming up in a week or two, so would you like to give us a rough draft of such a letter for consideration? No, I love giving work to other people, as if Jane needed any more.
Anyway, I think that covers all my stuff.
Just on the shoppers, Mr. Gentleman was reported as saying in July with the calling powers that there would be a shoppers parking area in Section 72 as well.
Yeah.
And that's all we know. So that has to be plugged somewhere as well. Plus common ground tradies need parking space as well.
Yeah. Well, you were saying that there is a section, part of Section 72 that's likely to be used for parking. Is that right?
It's all the same.
So that's same sort of message, yeah. Yeah. All right. So we can consider that at our committee meeting. It doesn't have to be a polished draft. Just if you have enough time, put down some ideas and leave it up to us to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Any more residents' associations reports?
could
Yep.
mention the Lynham Community Association. We had our Light Up Lynham event about a month ago. It was very successful. I think there was about over 1,000 people turned up on the night. So we were quite happy with that event. And what we're doing now, interesting in the discussion about urban space or urban open space and tree cover, the government's got this Adopt a Park grants program out at the moment, and so we're putting in for a grant to adopt one of our neighbourhood parks and to do a rejuvenation of that park and try and set up a park here.
All right.
And I think Downer's doing a similar.
So is Hackett.
Right.
Oh, really?
So everybody's-
So it's
oh, right, so we'll do it. Oh, that's good.
Oh.
We'll do it in, for money.
I'm glad somebody's taking those opportunities up. I looked
Did
at
you
that.
all know that the closing date has been extended?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they've given it another week.
Notice.
Oh, that's good news. I looked at that and thought, more work, I don't need it. Any other residents' associations reports?
Oh, sorry, I should mention,
Oh, yeah.
we got that call from a nursing home resident who was concerned about the loss of bulk billing doctors
Oh,
in the Dixon shops.
yeah, I didn't realise that the person was in a nursing home. Yeah, there is an issue. Apparently the new walk-in centre in Dixon is coinciding with the disappearance of Dr. Smee, who's the only bulk billing doctor in the area. And also the loss of, what do you call it, toenail cutting, podiatry services in the area that's going to move out to Belconnen or somewhere.
Well, apparently there's a podiatry in that seniors health centre who services older patients.
At the moment there is.
He's being relocated, I gather.
Yeah, so there is a bit of concern about that. I'm not sure what we should be doing about it or what we could be doing about it. So if anybody's got any ideas, tell us now, or if you think of something.
I raised it when I got a call from Rachel Stephen-Smith about the pool forecourt upgrade, because she's the health minister, and she was interested. So, I mean, I imagine it wouldn't be out of line to follow up with a letter.
Yeah. Is anybody interested in drafting a letter?
You've got a job, Leon.
You have? Are you going to do it?
You now have a job.
No,
You've been giving them to everybody else. It's yours.
Maybe we could ask Ben Ponton to sort it out.
Yeah, what good.
No, my role as chair is to delegate. If nobody wants to be delegated to, then the issue.
Sounds like I wrote a letter.
Sorry, Jane, is this walk-in centre is coming? It's not actually up and going yet.
Not up and going at all. Apparently, I walked in and spoke to the woman in the reception area, and she said she thinks it's going to be next year, but she doesn't even know if she'll be working there then, or it just all seemed very unclear.
Is that going to be where that doctor was? In
Right.
that
Right
little
behind the
Yeah.
library.
behind the library?
This side of the library.
It's in the budget.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're retaining that building.
Yeah. And a walk-in centre is great, but of course if it comes at the expense of services to needy older people, then maybe it's not so great.
Especially in this area where there are a lot of
That's
people
right.
simply can't afford to pay.
And because the bulk billing service obviously is so important for people on low fixed incomes.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are not many bulk billing doctors in Canberra for whatever the reasons.
People can't afford expensive taxis. So.
Maybe I should put in an ad for community services. I get, I'm a casual driver for a community services organisation on the south side, and since the improvements to the bus system about 6 months ago, we've gone from 2 cars on the road each day to 3 cars on the road each day. So it's been good for our business, although we're a not-for-profit, so it hasn't been good for our profits. But if anybody is in a situation of needing transport because you break your leg or something, or because you're over 65, there are community services organisations like Northside Community Services, who can bring a car around, take you to where you need to go, without it costing you much money at all. Yeah. All right, so sorry for that shameless self-promotion. Is there anything else anybody wants to raise, or should we close the meeting? All right, close the meeting. Okay, let's close the meeting. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for changing the constitution so dramatically so that we are now a new organisation.
Okay,